I think we have to start from the place of the food system is broken, and then how do we fix it?
Hello and welcome to the CSO podcast, where we talk to leaders in sustainability and experts in the ecosystem. We're discussing how we can work in a way that makes a positive impact on the planet. I'm your host, Harald Neidhardt, and in this episode, we talk to Daniella Vega, SVP for Health and Sustainability at Ahold Delhaize. Daniella is also one of the authors in our book, Leadership for Sustainable Futures. And most importantly, she also is a winner of the Top 100 CSO Awards. So she became our third space silver winner in Davos in January. And that's a special recognition for your work in the industry. Hi, Daniella. How are you today?
Hello, I'm really good. Thanks, Harald. How are you?
Very well. Thank you so much. Let's start. And maybe we start by talking a little bit about your role as CSO, a Chief Sustainability Officer, and the focus on health and sustainability at Ahold. Maybe you share a little bit about the company and some of the projects that you're working on right now.
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to do that. So my role is Senior Vice President of Health and Sustainability at Ahold Delhaize, and we're a large Dutch-American food retailer. So we're a business of about 88 billion euro business. We're in the east coast of the US. So we have some great brands that reach right up in from Portland, Maine, right down the east coast of the US. So some big brands that you might have heard of, like Food Lion, Hannaford, Giant Food, and the Giant Company, and Stop and Shop. So they're all our brands in the US. And then we have food brands also in Europe. So we cover the Benelux. So we have Albert Heijn in the Netherlands, Delhaize in Belgium, and some food retail brands in Southeastern Europe and also in Indonesia. So we're a large food retailing on the whole, although we do have a digital marketplace business in the Netherlands as well, Bol. But mainly we're focused on food. So my role is a really interesting one that combines looking at health and sustainability, which I particularly enjoy because it helps us take a systems view on the challenges that we face around those two things. And when you dig deeper into those things, you look at things like climate, nature, circularity, health and nutrition, and how we can encourage our customers to make better choices and have healthier and more sustainable diets.
First of all, I think I was a customer. I lived in New York 7 years, and so in Connecticut there was a Stop and Shop. That's where we went. So it was interesting to see when you mentioned it, or when we read about it, that you're actually really global. I think this Indonesia span. Is there like a long history in the company of trade? Holland is always famous for long trading from any kind of products, exotic products.
Yeah, I mean, well, the in 2016, Ahold merged with Delhaize, and there was legacy brands in Europe and the US, and so it's a kind of beautiful marriage of that continuation of that transatlantic partnership and cultural connection between the Dutch and the Americans, which is great.
Before you in your career, maybe we can talk about it in a little second. You also were in fashion and other industries. Now in food retail, what are maybe some of the biggest challenges in achieving the sustainability targets?
Yeah, well, I think when I moved from fashion to food, the connection, of course, is in the agricultural root of the product. So it's either growing food or growing materials for fashion. And so very similar challenges in some ways and different in other ways. So essentially it comes down to how we grow, how we produce, how we consume, and how we discard of products, whether that be the fashion or food, and how we move from that kind of take, make, lose system to a more circular system of regeneration, whether that's in fashion or food. So the issues are the same. So looking at the carbon impact, whether that's in our own operations or across our value chain, looking at the waste in that value chain and trying to close those loops, as I mentioned. So in the food industry, it's very focused for us on things like packaging and food waste, and of course more recently looking at the impact that we have on nature and biodiversity, and ultimately the impact that nature and biodiversity has on us and for us in our business, because it's critical. Without nature, there's no food. That's certainly no fashion. And then health, as I said, is a new area. Was a new area for me when I moved into the food sector. All the sectors that I worked in, and I worked in the media before I jumped into fashion and then food. All of these sectors, the thing that I most enjoy, I think, is the customer connection that we have. So Ahold Delhaize, we serve 63 million customers a week. And at Selfridges Group, it was 50 million, and then I was at Sky TV before that. So large businesses with a really close connection to the customer is what I really enjoy, because I think the customer is a key component of the system and part of the shift that we need to make. It's a really exciting interface to work at in sustainability.
That's super cool. And fantastic brands that you worked on. Congratulations. Did you, let's say, looking at, I liked also the connection that you said, well, we're growing our textiles. Not a lot of people know where, cotton comes from. It comes from soil. And if the soil is not good, the whole chain doesn't work. Super. Thank you for making this connection. And food waste, we know it's such a big topic. I like the circularity approach, and maybe just a follow up on this. Do you think is this something where, because we know Amsterdam wants to be a circular city and Kate Raworth is very active there. I think is there something in Holland that makes it a little bit more of a bigger topic? I think this is a little bit showing, I would say, in a good way.
Yeah, I definitely. It's a really privileged position to be able to look across all of the markets that we're in, and we're very fortunate to be close to our customers, so we can draw on that kind of customer insight. And definitely, the Netherlands has a very mature customer in that way. So it's the market where Albert Heijn, our brand here in the Netherlands, is most advanced on many sustainability issues, and the ones that are off the top of my head are definitely around diets and shifting to eating more plants, to a greater ratio of plants in meals. So Albert Heijn have a commitment of reaching 60% of sales from plant-based proteins versus animal-based proteins, and that really is groundbreaking for a retailer, because it shifts the access to alternative proteins, and the Dutch market is very ready for that, and we see that through not just research around customer intention, but also how they buy. So it bridges the say-do gap that we all know customers intend to buy sustainably and would like to, but then it comes to their wallet. It's often a different story, especially when there's a price premium for sustainable goods. So I think in the Dutch market, we do see the rise of Albert Heijn's, their own label, plant-based label, and in store it's really obvious when you go in, the incredible fresh produce assortment they have, and then plant-based. not just meat alternatives, but plant-based solutions to substituting meat. So on their websites and apps, there's alternative recipes. There's nutrition coaches that show customers how to cook differently and how to eat more healthier and sustainably. And I think the most recent step that Ahold Delhaize have taken is carbon labeling on some of their products. So this is really in experimental stages, because whereas health is very close to what you eat and what you put into your body. So navigation systems like Nutri-Score across Europe are really well known and understood, the ABCDE rating. Carbon is not, and it's a much harder story to tell for customers. So Ahold Delhaize have the capacity and the acceptance from their customers, from the market, to trial these things and really pioneer what shopping at a food retailer will look like in the future.
Super interesting. I only know the CO2 markings or numbers from Oatly. That's for the first time, and they try to say, "Hey, food industry, follow us" or something. So this is super interesting that you do this in your stores. Amazing. Now, in the food retail, we talked about the consumers a lot. Now, maybe what are biggest challenges in achieving the sustainability targets? Maybe on the other side, maybe on the supplier side.
Yeah, I think you've touched on one of the biggest challenges, not just for food retail, not just for Ahold Delhaize, but for all businesses, which is Scope 3. And I think, I've worked in sustainability for a long time, for about 20 years. And I would say in the last 3 to 5 years, I've seen the kind of knowledge around Scope 3 and methodology and measuring and data really improve, and so that's a really hopeful thing that people are getting their heads around how to measure. I see more collaboration in industry networks, trying to work out the specific pathways to net zero for their industry, and signing up, of course, to guidance from Science Based Targets Initiative. But I think it's very, very challenging, because of course it's different. It's a very different approach you need to take on Scope 3 to on Scope 1 and 2, which is in your control. So it's almost like a traditional balance sheet. You plan, you write your roadmap, and then you have a plan, and then you can budget accordingly. And you kind of know. I mean, it's still a big challenge, because it's a transformation. And for us, Scope 1 and 2 is things like energy and heating in stores. It's things like electrifying our fleet, and I think that and refrigerants, which is a huge issue and challenge for us in the US. So, but despite those challenges, we know we have a very clear costed plan to get to our interim targets in 2030, and then net zero in 2040. Whereas Scope 3 is it's a different set of people that you're dealing with. So for us, it's our chief merchants and our sourcing teams, and it's very much based on the Scope 1, 2, and 3 of our partners. So it's a different approach and takes a very different mindset. It's reliant on estimated data in many cases, because if you think about, we have hundreds of thousands of SKUs and many thousands of suppliers. So we have the food system is you have the sort of big players, the big producers who we source, who are our kind of, I guess, top 100. There would be many of those big players, but then there's a very long tail of small to medium suppliers. And so that means we're collaborating with everyone from the Unilevers and the Nestle's of this world to the very small farmers directly. So it's a very different approach you have to take, and that's why things like designing resources to educate and help people even understand what a carbon footprint is are critical. And so is a plan and the acceptance of the fact that we have to move forward and take action before we have a perfect plan. So estimations will get better and better, but there'll still be estimations for a very, very long time. And that's a real mind shift, especially for our finance friends who like the certainty of fully costed plans based on actual primary data.
Yeah. I see the complexity, and thank you for diving into these details. Now, if we talk all about the challenges, maybe what are some of the biggest opportunities in your area and your expertise to make an impact? Let's talk about opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, I am an optimist at heart. I think you have to be if you work in sustainability for any length of time. And the reason I moved into the food sector was because I saw the opportunity. So at the end of COVID and throughout the pandemic, I saw food retailers become the social centers of communities, and really the role of food retailers as a community hub, and that's where I saw the opportunity of the food system. And I'm not saying it isn't broken, because it is. I mean, I think we have to start from the place of the food system is broken, and then how do we fix it? And I think so. There's so many opportunities in all of the areas that we've discussed. I'm particularly excited about the opportunities for health, both sides of the pond. So in Europe and the US, very different approaches, but very huge challenges to tackle. But how amazing to think that we can get up every morning and inspire everyone to eat and live healthier and more sustainably. That's a hugely inspiring purpose, which is our purpose at Ahold Delhaize. So I think it's these big systemic issues that are the opportunities for the food system, which is, in my view, the biggest lever that we can pull to change as part of the sustainability transition.
Great. Now, you talked about your prior career in fashion, and while you're here, I'd like to maybe just give one extra talk and follow-up question for this. So we know fashion is often criticized for all the fast fashion and a lot of waste, the mountains in Chile. It's all really heartening to see. So in your opinion about fashion, how can fashion become more sustainable? And luckily you have an outside view. You can maybe be more candid about that.
Yeah. I mean, I've always been quite candid. I've always worked within the system, but always been very clear about my reasons why I work in the system, and that's to kind of use our position as in media or fashion or food to help change it. The term is tempered radicals, I think, that we like to call ourselves in sustainability, but. In Selfridges, so I was working in Selfridges Group for 7 years. So they're luxury department stores in various different markets in the Netherlands, in UK and Ireland, and in Canada. So predominantly fashion, but also food and beauty. And I think when I started at Selfridges Group, I was very lucky to work with an amazing chairman, Alana Weston, who was the owner and chair of Selfridges Group. and also happened to be an environmental activist. So that expanded my scope. And when I came to her with ideas, she would build on them. They were never quite good enough. So that was an amazing privilege to work with Ilana. And where we started with the department store models is to use them as a creative canvas. And we started looking at oceans back in 2010, and used the store as a canvas, and used the whole creative arsenal of the shop window and the website and the in-store experience to really bring the message to life. And for me, that was especially important because I come from a communications and strategy background. So storytelling is really key, and how to engage the sort of masses. So we started with fish, and we had a lot of praise for being kind of first to bring these concepts of overfishing and marine plastic pollution in. This was before Blue Planet. But we were also criticised with people saying, well, what have fish got to do with fashion? And I think rightly so in some ways, because we were selling fashion, so using materials from cotton to wool to polyester, but focusing on these issues as a sort of retail activist, as we like to say. And so the development at Selfridges and in the fashion industry was really to turn that spotlight inward and look at what are the most material issues to our business. And so for me at Selfridges Group, that developed into Project Earth. So from Project Ocean to Project Earth. And I think the key transformation was when we started to look at business model transformation instead of campaigns and activation. So we looked at business model transformation, and what that means for a fashion business like Selfridges was, if you think of a pie, you have three things in that, or three thirds in that pie. You have better materials. So how do you make your garments from recycled, upcycled materials that have less impact on the planet, and move away from virgin materials? So that was one. The second one was, how do you look at circular models in business? So for fashion, it's rental, repair, and resale. So we were the first to go to brands like Gucci and Prada and all of the Louis Vuitton, all of the kind of very high luxury fashion brands, and say, hey, what about a kind of second hand Gucci pop up at Selfridges? And at that time, there was very little interest, and so we explored by putting charity shops in Selfridges. We worked with Oxfam on a pop-up charity shop. So you had second-hand designer clothes next to, Gucci shops and Prada shops. And that grew, and then we started to get interest from the brands and developed these concepts. So rental, resale, and repair was huge. And then the third of those sections is really around experience. So how can we start to sell experience rather than product, and move away from that transactional concept? So luxury is a really good space to play in that, because the whole nature of luxury is designed to buy a product that you connect with and you keep forever. So it's very different, I think, to fast fashion, as you mentioned, which is a model which is designed to not last, and frankly, we will not recycle our way out of the fast fashion problem. The whole business model is broken. So that, I mean, that's fast fashion is very different from luxury in that sense.
So fascinating to hear your story. And why don't we? You have such a long journey of driving these brands. But how did you actually start to become a chief sustainability officer? What was your journey in the beginning? Did you, how did you start?
Yeah, I've always been fascinated by and inspired by nature. So that was my starting point, really. I grew up spending a lot of time in nature, and when I left university, I spent time in South America, and I worked as a researcher and then a producer for natural history programs, which is really, I think I mentioned in my chapter in the book, is really where I started learning about systems without really knowing that I was learning about systems. But my whole job was to observe systems and record them and tell the story in the form of a natural history program or wildlife documentary. So that was my route through the media, and there was no sustainability at the time. And once I came back to Europe from South America, I found that I wanted to move into business, and I was living in London. So I found that I could use my skills in what was at the time called community investment. And so I started work in Channel 4, a media company in the UK, looking at social issues and, getting kids into the creative industries and exploring kind of challenging social issues. And then that kind of evolved into corporate social responsibility and CSR, and then corporate responsibility, and so I really started in the S, if you like, of the ESG, and then my remit was gradually kind of expanded into environmental and governance. So with at Sky having a full remit across them all. So I think there are so many different routes in, and mine was just one way, and that gave me that grounding in systems thinking. But there are many ways in now. It's changed a lot.
Fascinating to come from nature and serve nature. I think is a really great circle that you're in, or that you started. Looking a little bit into the future, and we are closing soon. How do you see the role of the CSO evolve in the next 5 years? And we know it's all complex right now, and we have a poly crisis, as you also say in the book. It's a lot of status quo right now, but in this role, what do you see as this, let's say, how does this role evolve in the next 5 years?
It's an interesting question, because I do think we're in a phase. If I step back and look at the system, look at it from a systems change perspective, I think if you look at any models of systems change, you can see turbulence, and then when a system's about to tip, you see major pushback from the incumbent system. I think we're at that point now, and so I think that at the moment there's a real tug of war going on with CSOs, because on the one hand, they have responsibilities around doing less bad in the current system, and reporting is a major factor in the role of all CSOs. And I think whilst the avalanche of reporting that we have is ultimately useful, because it shines a light on non-financial metrics and transparency and helps with disclosure. It's very much taking up the headspace of CSOs. So I think, to your question, I think a lot of new CSOs are coming into this space to focus on that. And I think it's a period of time and where we are in the systems change where we will go through that. And so I think it's critically important for CSOs to be able to have that systems thinking muscle, and whilst dealing and navigating their way through the ESG avalanche, to be able to keep the focus on systems change and business transformation. I think that's going to be the critical skills for the CSO to juggle going forward in the next 5 years.
Great encouragement for people who want to go with their purpose and have action, so to say. In closing, because this is so engaging, I could, talk another hour with you. Hopefully we can do that offline, but for the sake of the episodes, let me maybe finish with one closing question, because you talked just about, there's all these reporting and official things you have to do, but maybe throughout your time now at Ahold, is there one initiative or an action item, maybe what was your biggest achievement where you're like, okay, I'm proud of this, this was a hard nut to crack, or this was something really exciting? Maybe close us with one specific achievement or project initiative that you want to highlight.
I think there's two, if I might be so cheeky to have two.
Okay.
So I think firstly, what is the fact that one of the reasons I joined Ahold Delhaize was the scale. I thought 414,000 people working in this business. 16 amazing food retail brands, large food retail brands. Imagine the scale of impact we can have when we get behind certain sustainability issues. And so I think for Ahold Delhaize, if you look at how we set up those brands for success, we've got certain levers at the global function that we can pull, and we've connected non-financial metrics on health, healthy sales, on food waste, on carbon, scope 1, 2, and now scope 3, to people's incentives. And so it's really, I'm really proud that we're lining up the businesses to increase the impact in those areas. And that's not easy, and it's a very brave thing for our executive team to have agreed to and taken on. So that's my first one. And my second one is really around mindset shift. And I'm very proud of the partnership that we developed with Cambridge, so the CISL, the Cambridge Institute for Sustainability Leadership. We developed a partnership with them and took 130 of our senior leaders through a 4-day program at Cambridge, all about these big systems trends and forces. We looked at the impact of animal versus plant-based protein. We looked at circularity. We had the best speakers from all around the world. We were very fortunate to come together for those days across 4 cohorts and really talk about how scary it is, the change, what it means to different roles within the organization, and start to make the issues relevant to the leaders across our organization. And it was so successful that we're now in the middle of a board level program for our supervisory board, using that same kind of Theory U, Otto Scharmer approach to really kind of set the scene, blow people's minds, sit in the kind of bottom of the U for a moment, and then start to kind of collaborate and work our way out of the U. So I think I'm really proud of the fact that we spent the focus and the time for such a large group of leaders on the mindset shift that we need to reimagine our business and food retail for the future.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Daniella. And for those of you who want to know more a little about Daniella, you can read her essay in the book, Leadership for Sustainable Futures. And thank you so much for being here with us today in the CSO Impact Podcast, Daniella. It has been fun. Thank you so much.
That's my absolute pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.